right on time. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Are you going to make it till next Friday? No, one more week. One more week. Then you have a beloved week off, all right? You can do it. You can do it. Only 2 more days with me after today. All right. Well, I want to remind you of this. All right? So, and you can scan that too if you want to go ahead. So, this is next week. This is next Wednesday, right? March 12th. So, once again, if you're going to apply for PSYC, no time like today. Get that done. It's so much simpler now than it used to be. So, take advantage of that. The application is simpler. So, follow that link to a letter from Grace, the president of PSYC, with all the details, and it has a link to the application form and process so that you can become one of them. All right. So, back to this. Boink. All right. We're jumping into another chapter, as you see, and I'll be finishing that up next week, and we'll be done on Wednesday, and we will not have class next Friday, right? Because it is exam week, and just so happens to be a little early for spring break, so you can take advantage of that if you wish. All right, I did this already and showed you this illusion here. So we're going to be looking at perceiving movement today. And I actually don't have a very good explanation I can share with you for how this illusion works, but I'll give you just a non-answer. It tricks your visual system into detecting movement when there is none. Okay, so that's not an explanation, but it serves as a vague one. So ever since COVID, I haven't really done this kind of thing. Break you guys up into little teams and do things, and I'm not gonna actually. So I just thought it would be fun to take a moment, since we have time, to do this out loud together instead of breaking you up into teams or groups and having you do this. So we're going to be looking at, physical movement today. And wait, this isn't the one okay, yeah, this is, okay. There was a different one I was thinking this was. Anyway, I should have read it before I started talking about it. So, okay, I'm glad I did, because I was going to talk about something else. Anyway, let's share some of these strategies, if you will. So this might not at first have anything to do with movement, but perhaps we'll see how it does. And it has everything to do with faces, a topic that we keep revisiting in sensation and perception. The importance of faces, detecting faces, what we do with faces, what we express with faces, what we try to hide on our faces, how we try to read people who are expressing or hiding what they're revealing or not, trying to not to. So anyway, this is an issue that's, reality in our times now. You're on camera most all of the time. I'm on camera right now. I have it zoomed in so that I don't think any of you are on this camera. I don't think there's another one. A lot of classrooms have one pointing out to you guys, but when you walk out of this room, anyway, all over campus, you're on, everywhere you go, right? You're on so-called surveillance or security cameras. What could you do to hide your face? Let's skip the obvious ones, like put a mask on, put something over your face, pull your shirt up, pull a hood over. There's obvious answers, but is there any non-obvious answers you can think of that you could take to shield your face from not just cameras, but maybe people? But we're talking about cameras here. Yeah. Okay, look down, all right? Or up if the camera's low, or look away. I'll add to that myself. Okay, so maybe, yeah, don't face directly into the camera, okay? What else? Yeah.
You can walk
Walk behind, yeah, so kind of shield yourself, so, kind of hide in a sense, get behind people or take a route that gets you, I shouldn't be answering all your things, go behind other things, take a different route so you're not going to be in the path of the camera. What else? Yeah.
Like behind a sign or something.
All right, yeah. Hide behind a sign or something, or hold up. How about open an umbrella? Okay, I'm thinking out loud here myself. Okay, pop open an umbrella and kind of, all right. Can you think of anything high-tech-ish? I'm not asking because I can. I'm just, wondering if there's anything high-tech you could do. You see things in movies maybe like, I don't know, flash a strobe at it. Supposedly that like disables the camera or something. Okay. Yeah.
Wear a mask.
Yeah, wear a mask, yeah. Some of the cameras include infrared, so, you could, shine something that emits infrared, like a remote control, that kind of would, nobody else would see, the people wouldn't see, but it would look kind of blindingly bright, perhaps, and wash out the image on the camera. I learned things from movies, You watch James Bond or something. How about a smoke bomb? Good old classic, magician's smoke bomb. All right. Anything else? How about, I don't know, in line with a mask, I mean, like wear disguises, okay, if you want to, maybe you won't shield your face, but, at least you wouldn't be recognizable, fake hair or whatever, wigs, fake noses, glasses, blah, 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 all right? Maybe some weird makeup. All right. How about, we're talking about movement. How about anything, related to movement? Run really fast, I don't know. Zip through the frame so that maybe it would be blurry and you wouldn't show up as clear. Okay. Anyway, we'll move on. So you can take care of that. I got lots of codes embedded in today's PowerPoint. So if you're not here yet, you'll see the code pop up, or if you missed this one in the process. So I'll give you a second to scan that before I move on. Pardon me? It doesn't work? Back on track. All right. Okay, so this is in line with what I've been saying over and over again about why you have a nervous system. Evolutionary speaking, you have a nervous system in order to move. And then you have perceptual systems, sensation and perception. You have especially vision in order to help you move. And so it's got a lot to do with survival in the environment. This is, why did we evolve to see movement? Because it helps us survive. Obviously, it helps us move. If you're going to move, it's important that you see movement, your own movement, the movement of other things. It helps you catch things or avoid being caught, all right? So it's got definite predator-prey advantages as well as just basic movement, all right? You take it, I bet you take it absolutely for granted that you can detect motion, all right? But some people can't. They have, just like we've been talking about with lots of other things like faces and other more abstract things like edges and color and brightness and so on and form. You have a visual center. You have a piece of, you have a nugget in your visual cortex that processes motion. And if you have damage to that due to a stroke or something like that, you will be blind to movement. Not just blind to the actual movement, but then you'll also be able to, you would discover that you kind of can't imagine movement anymore, Right now I could have you, imagine, I don't know, anything. Imagine what if, imagine just all of a sudden I decided to just sprint full speed, screaming out the door, okay? Picture that fun scene in your head right now, okay? All of a sudden I start screaming and I run as fast as I can out of here. okay? Now, if you can like visualize that, and some of you are smiling, so I think you can, all right? Some of you are like, God, I wish you would. You know, you have a working nugget, all right? Now, if you had damage to that, you'd find like, you'd discover like, not only wouldn't I be able to detect that properly if you did it, I can't even really imagine it anymore. Same with other things, you know, color. If you lost the color nugget, you wouldn't be able to perceive the richness of colors that you're used to, and you also wouldn't be able to close your eyes and imagine colors anymore. You'd intellectually know they exist, but you wouldn't be able to like picture them in your mind, okay? So, lots of creatures develop, systems to try to conceal their detection, but that is going to fall apart. Watch this video. This is amazing. It's going to fall apart as soon as movement happens. All right. This is nature's CGI. Octopus. They can. You probably know this already. I have no concept for how this works. How does their nervous system know? I can kind of like I can wrap my head around like changing the color to match. But watch this thing. This is in reverse, but watch it. It not only blends the color, but then it gets the pattern. It develops. It matches the fucking patterns. I can't wrap my head around that. I think octopi maybe are from, an alien life form. I don't know. They seem so different than anything else that evolved on Earth. All right? And maybe, by now you've maybe seen the other critter. These are images from your book, so maybe you spent time looking at them already, but there's a bug of some sort. There's a hippocampus right there, okay, right? Hippocampus, the seahorse, okay? Sharing its camouflage tendencies like the octopus. All right. So, camouflage works until, the creature decides to move, all right? All right, so on a much more basic level, one function of movement is to perceive things that are stationary differently or to help us identify them, all right? So just something basic like a car, which you probably have a lot of experience with, and even at any angle you can detect, and we saw that in a study earlier, that even if they're upside down, you can correctly identify cars more readily than you can identify faces upside down. But if it was a foreign object, or if you had never seen a car at any one of these angles, you can imagine how you wouldn't have a concept or understanding of what this thing is or what it might be for. All right? But as you walk around it and see the different features of it, you might be able to compare it to other things that you know about. So I don't know, imagine that you were from the distant past and, maybe there were things like horse and buggies, but never a car. You've never seen a car before. You might be able to look at that thing, I can imagine, and see like, it looks like it's got like some kind of funky wheels, like my buggy does. But anyway, you compare it with your memory, with your experience, and anyway, the movement at least gets you, even if it's just still images of, other angles, all right? And then, this kind of clever sculpture, you can walk around it and see how different it looks from different angles, all right? So the other functions of movement is to just help us, not just identify things, but to help us understand what's going on in whatever we're observing. So this classic study that's mentioned in your book, and I tracked down the video of it, so I'm going to show it to you in a second. They show this, just two-dimensional flatland world image of, a square and a couple of shapes, and the shapes move around. And so it's one thing to read about it, so I hope you'll enjoy this. Here, I tracked it down. I don't remember if it has any audio or not. I don't think it does. So just watch this and, you probably will find yourself seeing a story unfold. These things take on a personality, which is weird, right? How do you feel about the big triangle right now? How do you feel about the little triangle? How do you feel about the circle? What's going on in the circle's mind? And what is it in right now? It's in a house or something, right? And here comes the big bad triangle, and the little circle's hiding in the corner, and the little triangle's going to be brave and try to interject, and right, you get a little story unfolding just from movement. You know, get away. And the big bad triangle goes apeshit. Loses his temper and destroys the house, right? Okay, I mean, isn't that amazing that and you probably didn't need to be influenced by my narration of it. Or did any of you have a different story in your mind as it unfolded? Maybe it's a projection, it's kind of a Freudian projection test, perhaps. Reveals what goes on in your unconscious, about insecurities or something like that. Maybe I revealed too much. Maybe you had a very different, pleasant story unfold, or maybe you had no story unfold at all. I don't know. But most people who watched that, most people told a story similar to mine and had visceral feelings about the different shapes, feeling the anxiety and the fear of one of them, feeling the tentative boldness of one, feeling the mean bulliness of the big triangle and so on. Okay? Fascinating stuff. So our understanding of movement, starts sometimes with some very basics, all right? So, obviously we're gonna take a look at things like real motion, all right? Duh, how do we detect real, actual motion, all right? How do you detect my hand waving, all right? If I walk across the room, we'll see later today exactly how you perceive, if you keep your eyes on one spot and watch me move, if you look at that triangle, speaking of triangles, and, if you fixate your eyes on that, and as I go running, screaming past on my way out the door, all right? But keeping your eye on the triangle, you'll see one kind of movement, me like flashing across your fixation point. Or you might fixate on me, and relative to the background, I'm kind of, I stay steady on your retina, but the world sort of shifts behind it as I run past it, okay? And then you could imagine like, moving your eyes across a scene, or you walking through. Anyway, you got real motion, and we got different kinds of motion. Okay, we're gonna take a look at the different kinds of real motion that you took for granted. You just think motion is motion, all right? We're gonna, we can talk about illusory motion. We started this with that weird pattern that looks like it's moving, all right? So a stationary, stable, sometimes, stationary things give the illusion of movement. Apparent movement, all right? Our good old, here we're gonna, I warned you that we were gonna be looking at flashing lights, okay? This good example of just two blinking lights blinking one after another, okay? And I'm even adding, I shouldn't be adding the movement to it, okay? Anyway, as you watch two blinking lights, your brain will start to see them as going back and forth, even though they're not, okay? You'll see apparent motion or illusion. I could, insert literally, yeah, that's how every single video works, right? It's all still images, all right? Flash so quickly that you perceive them as blending together and you see the smooth movement if there's enough frames per second. If there's too few frames per second, you'll see it as choppy and, not quite smooth, all right? Add more lights blinking together and you can get all kinds of, displays like you see all over the place. All right, so another kind of movement is induced motion, all right? This is another typically an illusion, all right? You've all experienced this, I'm sure. You look up at the moon as clouds are drifting by in front of it, and intellectually you know the moon is not moving and the clouds are, but this is a perfect, even this video captures it, right? That moon looks like it's moving, doesn't it? Okay? And hopefully the video is, I should watch the video again. It could trick you by, if they panned the camera, then the moon would be moving on the frame, but it's not. The moon is stationary in the frame that we're looking at. Okay? So intellectually, that moon is not moving, but doesn't it look like it's moving? That's called induced motion, all right? You've probably experienced this in a car. I just did the other day. I knew this was coming up. I think it was like it was earlier this week. I was stopped in my car and behind another car, and fumbling with something in the car, and out of the corner of my eye, I see the van in front of me start to move forward a little bit, even though I knew the light was still red. Okay, but he moved forward 5 feet or something like that. And I kind of instinctively, had my foot on the brake and re-jammed my foot on the brake because it gave me the sensation that I was rolling backwards, okay? And I could almost, for a fraction of a second, I could feel, I felt like I'm rolling, okay? You've all experienced something like that where cars are stationary and you're not really paying attention and they move one direction or another. Maybe you've been in a train, as one, like next to it, you're in a train car and another train, pulls in or leaves or comes, and you feel like, oh, we're moving, or I'm rolling back. Anyway, that's induced motion, another kind of illusion. Sometimes movement results in some clever kinds of other kinds of illusions. All right, so I demonstrated this before and talked about it at the very beginning, one of the first, that first day when I talked about some of my favorite things. So the so-called waterfall effect, or a motion after image, okay? The next time you're out somewhere, and you see a real live, waterfall, remember this and do yourself a little fun favor and sit for 1 minute and enjoy nature. Sit for more than 1 minute and enjoy nature. But if you're in such a rush, just sit for one minute and stare, somewhere at the middle of the waterfall. And it might even work on this little image right here. So if you stare right there, at the middle of my waterfall, while I talk about it, your visual system is detecting that very repetitive, steady motion. Keep fixating at that point, and it calculated that when it first needed to, and it's like, okay, that's redundant. I got that, and it kind of will go into auto mode, and it'll just like, okay, I got it. I don't need to recalculate this over and over and over again. It's repetitive. It's doing the same thing. All right? Now look at it. I don't know. In nature, you'd have to do this. Like, look at a tree or something. Okay? Did it work at all? Do the branches or something kind of look like they're going the opposite direction? It'll work better in real life than a silly GIF on a small screen. Trust me on that. Okay? I have another demonstration of that. So look at that for 40 seconds. I promise this one will work. Watch that timer count backwards. And enjoy the funky tune. 20 more seconds. And just, if you kept your eyes stay, for as long as you stayed staring at that same spot, those clouds were just swirling away, weren't they? All right? So here, without the illusion present, just in case you don't believe me, let's play it from there. Unless you're still experiencing some motion after effect, stable, all right? The clouds were not moving. Okay. Maybe another time I'll take a little bit of time to try to explain that. In the meanwhile, you can go listen to David Eagleman's podcast, Inner Cosmos. And in one of the episodes, I wish I could remember which number, he talks about that effect, and he gives a good explanation for how it happens. So, in the meanwhile, let me play you this. It's going to incorporate this and some other fun illusion. So enjoy this.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here. This is a completely still image, but as your eye reads what I'm saying and
wonder if it
jumps
works on a
from
screen.
word to word, the paragraph will appear to slightly, just subtly, wave and boil. The illusion is called anomalous motion. It's neat, but to say it's fun is a tautology because the word illusion literally
That didn't, I always wonder how things will, look on a big screen and with a projector. Did it look like it was moving from where you were sitting? Did any of you way back there did? Maybe it goes, okay. I think sometimes, I know like on a computer, if you're looking at it normally on a device, it really looks like it's moving. So maybe it's about the relative size, and way back there it looks smaller. And I don't know, up close, did it do it? For me, just standing there, it didn't really. So you guys could anyway, watch it on your own, on your own device, and you'll see it. Let me go back to him.
means to have fun, to mock, to play with. But illusions aren't just fun and games. They also teach us about our brains. Anomalous motion, for instance, demonstrates that our brains process things at different rates and piece by piece. After a saccade, a quick eye movement, higher contrast elements are perceived sooner than lower contrast ones. When arranged in just the right way, this delay is exploited and your visual system only has one explanation. Low contrast parts of the image didn't get processed later because this myelinated machine is wrong, but rather because the image itself must be moving. Akiyoshi Kitaoka's brilliant out of focus causes nearby neurons to disagree about the little slices they each detect. Some see big changes after a saccade and some see hardly any. This makes it difficult for our brains to calculate and factor in the effect of our own eye movements, so the image itself appears to be moving. But illusions aren't just about moving. They can also be moving, poignant, significant, practical. They can mean the difference between life and death, like in nature, or during World War I as dazzle paint on ships. This form of camouflage doesn't conceal the object, but rather makes it difficult for an enemy to ascertain its prey's true shape, and thus where it's heading or how fast it's going. In 1955, the Soviet Union displayed their new Bison and Bear long-range bombers at an air show. It looked like they had a lot. Afraid of falling behind, the US ramped up production on their own B-52 bomber. But the whole thing was an illusion. In the Soviets' film of the air show, the same few planes had been flown past the camera multiple times in formations that gave the illusion of them having more bombers than they really did. By the end of the 1950s, the Soviet Union only had about 150 long-range bombers, whereas the Americans, fooled by the illusion, had built nearly 2,000 at a cost of $900 million.
Nice, huh?
Architecture is full of examples of real-world, practical optical illusions. My favorite are Disney castles. They appear huge, but it's forced perspective, a lie. The tops appear further away from us because they are actually quite tiny.
Look at that.
Illusions also tell us about ourselves culturally. The Mueller-Lyer illusion is classic. The horizontal lines are all the same length, but the bottom ones appear longer to people from Western cultures familiar with our rules of perspective and man-made straight lines. However, Bushmen from Southern Africa and tribespeople from Northern Angola or the Ivory Coast aren't fooled at all. Akiyoshi Kitaoka is using optical illusions to discover glaucoma earlier than current techniques can, and anamorphic illusions are used to save lives. They look weird from any perspective but one, from which they seem to pop out, defying the environment's actual shape. Hoping to remind drivers to always pay attention, traffic safety organizations in West Vancouver, Canada placed a skewed decal on the road. From the right perspective, the perspective of a driver in this case, it becomes a 3D illusion of a child you are about to hit. Slow down. Bruspup has made some incredible examples of the 3D effect such illusions can have. This object? Just an anamorphic projection. Anamorphic illusions have also been used to safely practice political dissent. In 1746, supporters of the Stuart claim to the British throne had to be quiet about it. It was treasonous. So, sympathizers served things on trays that looked like this. Innocuous enough until only supporters were around, and it was safe for someone to place a reflective goblet or cylinder on the tray, revealing the tray's anamorphic secret, a hidden portrait of their illicit love, Charles Edward Stuart himself. The Encyclopedia Titanica lists descriptions of every body recovered from the Titanic. It's quite macabre. Why was the iceberg not seen until it was too late? And why did the nearest ship, the Californian, not come to the Titanic's rescue sooner? Tragic questions whose answers might be optical illusions. The Titanic was sailing through conditions perfect for mirages. This theory points out that the Titanic sank at the border of the warmer Gulf Stream and the frigid Labrador Current, where the normal case of cooler air at higher altitudes was inverted, a thermal inversion. Now, because the temperature of air affects its index of refraction, a thermal inversion means light bending in atypical ways. If light reaches the eye from higher up than usual, objects can appear to float. Seriously, like this ship off the coast of Australia. A thermal inversion can also render objects completely unrecognizable, hidden within a haze, like this ship, or like an iceberg, or a sinking ship in need of help. The Delbuff illusion may be causing teeth to split and crack more often than they should when dentists drill holes in them. Dr. Robert O'Shea observed 8 practicing dentists and found that they were all drilling holes that were too big, even though they knew the correct size to be drilling. Why? Well, it may be the same reason people eat more food when they're given a bigger plate. Objects appear smaller when enclosed by larger areas. Holes of the same size may appear different sizes on bigger teeth. Dentists may be deciding that correctly sized holes drilled into teeth need to be made larger, not because they do, but because perception is a tricky thing. Illusions affect not only big ships and teeth, but also your future. The end of history illusion is our tendency to think of ourselves today as somehow done. Sure, I went through a lot of personal growth and changes in taste in the past, but today, who I am now, this is pretty much the final me. But that's not true. Studies have consistently shown that people underestimate just how different they will be, say, 10 years in the future, even though they can easily point out how much they've changed since 10 years ago. I like how Daniel Tomasulo puts it. We believe we are going to live, love, and long for where, who, and what we are thinking about right now. But the research says it just ain't so. This too is a transient state. Yogi Berra put it even more succinctly. The future ain't what it used to be. Their advice is, don't imagine your future. Look at other people and their experiences instead. Take their advice. Your imagination is just that. Their experiences are actual data. Well, of course, it's not that simple, which brings us to our final illusion, the illusion of control. Named by psychologist Ellen Langer, it's our tendency to believe we control the outcomes of things we demonstrably don't. It can help motivate us to not give up, and in healthy people at a healthy level, it is optimistic self-appraisal. But it's a lie. In one study, traders in the City of London's investment banks were shown a graph of a real-time stock price and given 3 buttons that secretly didn't do anything to affect the price, but they were told the buttons might have an effect. Try them out, see what you can do. Afterwards, the traders were asked to rate how much they felt they had been able to control the stock price with the useless buttons. And it turns out, the traders who reported the greatest sense of control over the stock price were the ones who scored lowest on risk management tests, and in the real world, contributed the least to their company's profits, and in terms of salary, made the least money. It's kind of a bummer. The illusion of control is a nice feeling, but sometimes it's fine. Sometimes it even pays handsomely to admit you don't have control. And as always, thanks for watching.
Lots of good stuff in that. You might enjoy watching that again. Not now, but I encourage you to watch that again. That illusion of the end of times illusion, okay? That's really a neat one too, and it's one that really, at any point in your life, you ought to stop and think about, but particularly this juncture of your life where you probably fully realize you're at a junction, right? I mean, think back to just 4 years ago or 5 years ago. Don't you agree you were much different just 5 years ago than you are now? Okay? And now if you project yourself, think what you're going to be doing or feeling or thinking or whatever, in 5 years. What will you be like and what will you be doing 5 years from now? All right? And then you can extend that backwards and forwards more years. What were you like 10 years ago? Maybe you were only, a single-digit age old, okay? And I'm sure you recognize how different you are now than you were when you were 8 or something. And, flash forward 10 years from now. At any age, my age, every age, people do this. They think that, they recognize, yeah, I've changed a lot in the last 5 or 10 years. I recognize all the changes I went through, some predicted, most of them perhaps unpredicted. But yeah, when you think about the future, you tend to think you're gonna be kind of like you are now with the tastes and preferences for everything that, they'll be the same. I will still like the same things to eat. I'll like doing the same activities. I'll like the same music. I'll like the same books. I'll like the same kinds of movies and TV shows. I'll like the same kind of being around the same kind of people I'm around now and blah, blah, blah. Okay? But you won't, all right? You will, from 8 to 18, you had massive changes, and from 58 to 68, you'll have massive changes, and from 88 to 98, if you make it there, you'll have massive changes, maybe even more, just as massive as they were from 8 to 18, okay? 8 to 88, 88 to 98, okay? So I keep making a plug for David Eagleman's Inner Cosmos podcast. I just, on the walk-in today, finished a really good one on prediction, all right? And it has a lot, I already mentioned some things that he talks about in there. He talks about this, in that it's episode number 44, if you want to go watch it or listen to it. So he talks about tons of things that we've been covering this week, including this illusion about change and prediction. One more little subtle point, maybe 2 more subtle points that he mentioned in this podcast. I just really like, after he said them, I was like, that's so obvious. Why didn't I ever think of it that way? But he was just talking about the difference between memory and prediction. And basically, we think of those, the past and the future as very different things, right? Reflect on the past, reflecting on things that have already happened, good or bad, and think about the future. You're, projecting and predicting the future, okay? Include, like, what will you be doing, an hour from now, okay? You have a prediction about what you will do for an hour from now, and ask yourselves 2 hours from now, how did that unfold for me? Did I do exactly what I predicted I'd be doing for the next hour? And maybe you will, and maybe you greatly won't, okay? So anyway, we think of those things as very different, the past and the future. But he made this little subtle point, and I was like, that's brilliant. I should have thought of that a long time ago. Memory is for prediction, okay? So simple, it's like, well, duh, right? When you think about the future, when you're making any kind of prediction, including where you will be 1 hour from now, you're using your memory. Where do I tip, where am I usually on this day at this time, like 1 hour from now? I predict I'll be back in my office. Maybe some of you will be sitting in some other auditorium or classroom or going, whatever, think about, anyway, every prediction you make is based on memory. And obviously people who have deficits with memory lose their past. And that's, of course, like you think like, oh yeah, you might have an older parent or grandparent who's starting to suffer, dementia or Alzheimer's or just good old fashioned, cognitive deficits that happen to us when we get old, and thinking about like the memory going bad, all right? Well, their ability to predict is going to go just as much as the memory for the past. You need that to project forward. Simple things, even simple things like, did I eat lunch? Right? You might get to an age or know people who are at an age and they forgot that they ate like already, right? It's going to affect their ability to predict the future. Do I need to eat? Can't remember if I ate or not. Something you take for granted. Okay, so anyway, neat stuff. And the other point that was in there, I don't know, has much to do with any of this, but he was talking about storytelling as well, and how storytelling is a way for us to, not just understand the past, learn about the past, through stories and hear about things, but it also gives us a way to think about the present, but very importantly, it makes the ability to predict the future, all right? So predicting the future is, like Yogi Berra said, not what it used to be. Predicting the future is very difficult. Even so-called futurists, tend to be only about 10 to, at best, 50% accurate in making some of the predictions. And they're so-called futurists that are supposed to be specialists in thinking about, making, like judging what's going on in the past and the present, and flash forward in that to figure out what's going to happen to us, as a society in the future. And he was making the point, Eagleman was making the point about literature, about storytelling, So storytelling is a way to predict situations or futures that you have not experienced, all right? And somebody who's more, somebody who listens to stories, reads literature, for example, is training their brain to be creative about thinking about the unknown possibilities now and the future. And I thought that's a brilliant way to think, yet another like, argument for reading and paying attention to culture and just paying attention to, listening to stories, whether you read books or listen to stories, watch movies or whatever that matter. Okay, it trains your brain to think about things you haven't experienced. And people who are, I don't mean politically, but you might fall into that. People might fall into that. But people who are conservatives, I don't just mean political conservatives, but people, conservatives versus liberals. And of course, there's a political definition of both of those. But somebody who's conservative is, kind of, like thinking about the present as the past. Okay, why can't it be like the past, the good old past? I don't want change. We tend to not like change. Brains don't like change very much. Okay, it startles them. Like the waterfall illusion is you decide, your brain going, yeah, I got that, and all of a sudden it stops. It's like, fuck, change. And you like imagine a world shift, throwing upward in a way that just you know it can't. So your brain doesn't like change as a tendency. Some of you might be sitting there going, no, I love change. Yes, sometimes you do, but by and large, people don't like change. And so some people really don't like change. And I think there's a strong correlation between people who are like that and don't read, don't listen to stories, don't enjoy movies, don't enjoy learning about other possibilities, okay? So all this learning that you're doing, and if you're sitting there taking a literature class as a gen ed and thinking like, why do I gotta take this? It's training you to think creatively, not just about the story that you're reading, but it's training your brain to exercise that projecting a world that is different than the one you've been in and are in now. So, brilliant stuff. Okay. That's what I love about that podcast. It just makes you think about all kinds of things that, like, don't seem related. I never did plan to show this in class now, but things that were just in that, that last video are touched on this video. So this is I love Dan Gilbert, but he doesn't directly apply to sensation perception, so I'm not gonna take the time to, work him into this class, but look for Dan Gilbert videos, TED Talks and so on. So he talks about, this illusion of, what do you call it, the end of history, the end of time, the illusion that, right now I am fixed. This is how I'll be the rest of my life, pretty much, okay? He talks about that and lots of other things in this, psychology of your future self. You guys are, here to be thinking about your future self, so do yourself a favor and go listen to Dan Gilbert's thing about the future. Okay, so where am I in time? My future is only about 6 more minutes, so. Okay, so I'll only have time to talk about this. So back down to like some more mundane kind of basic sorts of things, okay? So the, comparisons of real and apparent movement, okay? So we're gonna talk more, next time when I see you, we'll talk about, real movement like I described, like, the 3 kinds of, I'll review those 3 kind of situations for real movement that we're gonna learn how we do. But let's look at the difference between real and apparent motion, all right? So participants are, scanned while sitting in a functional MRI, keeping track of brain activity, and while viewing, displays of things, all right? So in the control condition, it's a really simple basic study. I'll show you a slide in a second. 2 dots are in different positions and are flashed simultaneously, like this perhaps, okay? So that's not gonna create that's a control condition that doesn't create the illusion of apparent motion, okay? Another, for real motion, they're gonna see a single dot move back and forth across the screen. That's real movement, okay? And then they're gonna compare that with apparent motion, the 2 dots flashing sequentially back and forth like that, okay? And again, that gives the illusion of movement. So what does the brain look like during these 3 conditions, all right? So here's, you don't have to even, this is visual cortex. Don't worry about exactly where, but it's related. It's in, near those areas that are detecting motion, okay? So visual cortex areas, all right? So again, your cortex is weirdly but tightly mapped to your retina, okay? The visual field is reflected by neurons that are, they're convoluted and curled up, and if you unfolded them, they would be a fairly faithful representation of what's on the retina, okay? So, here's the control condition where 2 dots are just steadily on the screen, together, flashing together, all right? And so the 2 areas, and again, they're fixating on a cross in the center of the screen, and 2 dots are flashing left and right. And so 2 areas light up as each time those dots appear, okay? In this condition, the real motion, the dot or the square is actually moving across the screen. And you see the activity, it might go there and stop and pause and then go to the other side and pause and go to the other side and pause. Anyway, so you see it, you kind of see 3 chunks of, activity, okay? The two ends where it's, going and stopping and the space in between. Okay, so the areas between the 2 because it's literally going across cells that are processing the middle zone. Okay, well here's the really fun, nifty thing, all right? So, and I guess it wouldn't, it's neat, but I guess I wouldn't expect it to be anything differently. Again, the lights flashing back and forth are not moving across the space in the middle, but your perception is that they are, all right? And so it shouldn't be weird, but it still is kind of spooky almost, that the brain is matching that as if it was real movement, okay? It's a little lessened, okay? The colors of these, represent the level of activity. So with this color scheme, red is like most active, so because it's really there. The dot really does cross across there. So these areas in between do light up, okay? But here, they didn't cross over there. So these neurons that are supposed to, that would be detecting the movement when it's in between are lighting up, maybe not to the same degree that they do when they're actually stimulated, but they are tricked into being activated, okay? So that's as should be expected. It would be weird if you were perceiving something that the brain wasn't doing. Like if this was silent, like over here, that would need an explanation. Like, wait. There's no activity. Where is this, where else in the brain am I getting this illusion from? So you're getting it from right here. But it's just neat that those neurons are themselves tricked by activity flashing next to them. Okay? That's spooky and predictable, but still spooky. Okay? All right. And it's spooky to me how fast time goes when I'm having fun. So this is where we're going to go next time. So next time we'll look at these 3 scenarios. Okay, so go have a fun weekend. Enjoy it. I hope it's going to be a little bit nicer than it's been this week. So I'll see you. Looking forward already to seeing you on Monday.